Well, hey there, and welcome to Grace Church. We are so glad you're joining us here today. And if this is your first time, or maybe you're newer to Grace, special welcome to you. My name is Joel, and we would love to get you connected to what's happening here at Grace Church. And the easiest way to do that is by visiting our website or going to our app and finding the Barberton campus and jumping into what God is doing here through Grace Church. And we'd invite you to join us on a Sunday morning. We'd love to have you on a Sunday morning at 10:30, where we gather together as a church family and invite you into that, introduce you to some people, have a cup of coffee with you, enjoy the service. And we have kids programming for kids 0 all the way to 5th grade. So your kiddos are welcome to be a part of that gathering and be a part of what's going on in Power Kids on Sunday morning. And so we'd love to meet you there. We're starting a new series today called At the Movies. And so if you're a movie fan or your family is movie fans, this is the series for you. And so hopefully today our goal is to connect you to God's story through some relevant cultural stories that we see playing out on the big movie screens. So why don't you do this for me? Why don't you get ready to enjoy At the Movies together, and we'll hop right in. Well, before we jump into At the Movies, we had an amazing week at the Barberton campus. We had our Bible camp this week, which is a week-long VBS-style week for kids, kindergarten to 5th grade. We had over 50 kids join us this week, and we had a lot of different connections that are made. As of this moment that I'm filming, we had 6 kids say yes to Jesus, which is bonkers. We had another 5 or so be interested in baptism, and so we're extremely excited about what God is doing in and through Power Kids. Morgan and her team did a wonderful job putting it on and making it happen, and so we covet your prayers. Thank you for being prayerful over the last week, but also prayers for these little ones as they continue their journey following Jesus. And so we're excited about all things happening in regards to Bible camp and those things that took place this week. Like I said, we're jumping into a conversation called At the Movies. And personally, this is one of my favorite series to do because it's different, it's creative, it's new and unique comparative to some other series that we may do. And really, our goal is this. We want to utilize movies that are really famous, well-known, to point you to God's story. Because here's what I believe as I've read books and as I've watched podcasts and listened to different people speak, right? I believe that every story, or most every story, has the same trajectory. It has the same kind of flow to it, right? You have the same kind of general idea of where things are going because we all built into us have that story, that redemptive story desire inside of us. That's why we want to see the good guys win, the hero come back and defeat the bad guy, right? That's why we see stories go from these high moments to low moments to back to high moments. We embrace stories like that, the underdog, right? Whatever it may be. And we have inside of our desire these stories, but really, that desire that's built into us is a very gospel-driven desire. That I believe we want to see redemptive stories because that's the story of the gospel. That these stories we're going to look at all have gospel themes throughout them. And so I like to put it this way. It's cultural highlights that bring spiritual insights, right? Or hit stories that point to his story. However you term it, right? I think ultimately when you look at stories taking place, these stories are not just meaningless fun, but have communication coming from all sorts of different wavelengths. And we can kind of slice and dice where is God's story found? How is our world communicating this story, and how do we see the gospel in it? And so my desire is this, is that we would talk about these stories, talk about these movies, but you would actually put into practice watching these movies with your kids or with your family or with your spouse, and allow yourself to be grabbed by the beauty of the entertainment, the beauty of the filmmaking, but also by the story of the gospel, right? And as you watch movies, being aware of the gospel string throughout a lot of movies. And we are diving into 4 movies over the course of August to really kind of hone into this conversation. Now, all 4 of these movies can be found on Disney Plus, okay? And we did that very strategically so that if you have a membership or you know someone that does, you can very easily access these movies over the next 4 weeks, okay? And so we want you to jump in and watch them next week. Okay, give it a little preview. Next week, we're looking at this movie. It's maybe not as streamlined as some of the others, but Ron's Gone Wrong. It's a movie that's come out recently within the last year or so, and we're going to look at the conversation of what true friendship is like. And they take a fascinating angle on the technological digital age of things and maybe perceiving where it could go if we're not careful. And so we're going to jump into that. We're going to dive into some interesting conversations there. But really, what is true friendship? What does it look like to have a true friend, not just be connected to the world around us, right? One of my all-time favorites, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, okay? And so we're going to look at that, and we're going to ask the question, how do I forgive and lavish kindness onto someone? How do I forgive and lavish kindness onto someone? Right? We're going to see that play out. Tom Hanks does a great job displaying Fred Rogers and the story of his life. And so we're going to see how that plays out. And so if you haven't seen this movie, I would highly recommend it. It brings a lot of great conversation to the table, right? The last week is shockingly one of my favorites within the last year, Encanto, right? This is a famous Disney musical where Lin-Manuel Miranda did a lot of the score and the music and all that stuff. So it's really one that you're jumping to, you're dancing to, all that stuff. The kids love it, right? But there is some really deep kind of woven into that story questions and conversations. And we're going to look at specifically what's my purpose, what's my meaning, and we're going to kind of look at that within kind of how you see your family, right? Because there is this big family dynamic inside of the culture of the movie. And so we're going to jump into that. We're going to have some fun talking about all of those movies. But today, we're going to start with Aladdin, okay? So this is a classic Disney movie, a classic Disney feel. If you've never watched Aladdin, you're missing out, right? There's some fun music that comes from this movie. And here's where we're going to be in this sermon, in this movie today. We're going to ask the question, what is my significance all about? What does it mean to be significant in the world around us? We're going to look at this movie, and you maybe have watched this movie, or maybe you know about the story of this movie, and we're going to navigate that. But we're really asked that question because I think in between all of the songs and all of the storylines and the plot, right, is the essence of finding my significance and where that is at. Now, Aladdin is a movie that originally came out in 1993 by Disney, right? You see the cartoon version with Robin Williams and all that fun stuff, right? And recently, in 2019, they came out with a live-action Aladdin, right? Same story, just different, just live action, just a different feel to it. It's a fun, loving, adventurous, humorous kind of musical that Disney has produced. And this film captures a lot of songs that maybe you know or have heard or sing, right, with your kids or have sung with your kids. Friend Like Me, Arabian Nights, One Jump Ahead, Prince Ali, A Whole New World, right? What's interesting about Aladdin, we're going to get to the story, but it's not original to Disney necessarily. Disney just took it and made it really, really interesting and really fun story. But Aladdin is actually based off a Middle Eastern folktale, right? And this folktale, the title of it, comes from an ancient Arabic writing, 1001 Nights, okay? And so we see that Aladdin didn't originate in Disney, but it originated kind of coming out of this writings, these ancient writings based out of this book called 1001 Nights. Now, there's a French man named Antonio Galland, which translated all of those stories in the 1700s. And he ran into a Syrian storyteller who has been through a lot of different circumstances, a lot of different things, who filled in a lot of the missing gaps to the stories 1001 Nights, right? And as they're conversing, whether it was based off his own story or he was filling in the gaps of these stories, Aladdin appeared inside of these stories. And Aladdin basically is the story of a young man who goes from kind of being unknown, right, to riches, goes from rags to riches inside of this Middle East area. And I think what's interesting about Aladdin is this: as you see the story play out, we're going to talk about the story, we're going to talk about the dynamics there. As you see the story play out, I think it grabs you, right? Because there's something to be said about a rags to riches story. There's something to be said about going from not having enough or not making it to all of a sudden being in the palace, right? There's something innate to us. And I think that it's innate for us to wrestle with that, not because there's money involved or clothing involved, whatever. It's all about significance, right? Because some of us, we feel like we can relate to that story. Some of us, we feel like we can relate, but we're not there yet. Some of us, we're like, how do we get there, right? And what happens is in these stories, we present this ideal. And for us, we like watching it because it kind of allows us to vicariously live through that scenario. What if I lived in the palace? What if I went from that scenario to this scenario, right? What we see is this, that as Aladdin plays out, the main two characters, Aladdin and Jasmine, right, they're on this pursuit of what it means to be significant, have significance in their life. When you see the movie pop on to the stage, you see it open up, and Aladdin, right, songs go in, and they're kind of capturing who he is. And Aladdin, he is not very well known. He doesn't got a lot going for him. He's known as a thief. He's known as really a street rat, is what a lot of people call him. He has no family, he has no job, he has no home. And what is interesting about Aladdin is this, is that his feeling of insignificance is very visible, right? If you think about it, right, his feeling of insignificance is not something he just feels, but is visible to other people. And so he's running around in life and he doesn't feel like he has much going for him. And then you kind of see this scene pop up of Jasmine, who is the princess to the sultan and has what seems to be everything going for her, right? She's the princess, she's the daughter of the sultan of Agrabah. Her father is trying to arrange a marriage, right? And she doesn't desire that. She's in this palace but doesn't feel like she's free. She's chained down by the demands of her father. She's chained down by the demands of her title, even chained down by the assumptions of others. And she's fighting for significance in her own world, and yet she feels insignificant. And what's interesting about her feeling of insignificance is it's very invisible. Maybe not many people would assume it or think it, right? Even Aladdin is baffled by that. And for some of us today, before we even get into the next part, that is where we're at. We see this kind of scene in our own life, and for some of us, we can relate to Aladdin. Our feeling of insignificance feels very visible, right? We don't have the great job. We haven't maybe been able to hold a job for very long. We don't got the money or the clothes that we desire, that the world says is going on. Our family situation is pretty dim and dark, and it's kind of dismal, right? Friendships, it's like few and far between, right? You drive the beat up car, whatever it may be, right? Whatever the world would say is significant, you're like, that I just don't fit that. And so you feel insignificant in the world around you. For others of us, right, we feel like Jasmine. You feel like Jasmine maybe because the insignificance you feel, it feels very invisible because you have the right stuff. You have the wealth. You have the job. You have all the people around you, right? It looks like you have everything going on and significance is there. And yet, right, you feel like there's something missing. You feel insignificant. You feel chained down by all these things. You don't feel like you're able to live out of that. You feel like there's something more. I'm not sure where to get that, right? What's interesting is this. As the movie opens up, you see these two lives intersect. They start separate, they intersect, and what happens is the princess, which Aladdin doesn't realize she's a princess, gets to know Aladdin. and where he lives and what's going on, right? And what he wants to do and what he dreams to do, right? And all of a sudden, they start to interchange who they are, right? They start to exchange, like, okay, you're the princess and this is who you are and what's going on, right? And they have a connection. And Aladdin is trying to figure out how to maintain that connection. He's trying to figure out, how do I get her to like me? How do I get her to fall in love with me? And we see the evil guy of the movie come on, Jafar, and he says, hey, I got a deal for you. If you go into this cave where all these lost riches are and get this golden lamp, right? This golden lamp that has some powers to it, right? Then I will give you whatever you want. Well, Aladdin, right, jumps in there. It's the old golden lamp. The genie appears, right? And all of a sudden, things start to play out. And Aladdin is pursuing significance and what it means to be significant. We're going to look at that. There's an interesting scene that takes place with Jasmine and Aladdin. Where Aladdin, he's dressed up in all this prince garb and he's trying to impress her. And they're on this magic carpet and they're singing the infamous, famous song, A Whole New World, right? And as they're singing it, right, they're singing A Whole New World, where we can make the rules, where we can make the scene, where we can do it ourselves and allowing our heart's desire to lead us into that. That literally they're trying to create a different place so that they can achieve significance. Because here's the reality. In their minds, significance or value is found in creating a whole new world. A whole new world that's dictated by them, that is guided by them, that they can create so that they don't have to worry about anybody else. The world around us tells us that that is the way to significance. If we just create a world of our own or create our own world, then we will find significance within it. There's a man by the name of Wan Yang. He says this: people strive to feel good about themselves or seek to maintain their self-esteem. And this is fundamental to human nature, right? People strive to feel good about themselves or seek to maintain their self-esteem. It's fundamental to human nature. I would put in, people strive to feel good about themselves. People strive to feel good about their significance and maintain that. And the world tells us this, that significance is two things bundled together. It's performance and public opinion. It's performance and public opinion, right? We're told that if we must create a whole new world, it has to be based around performing and the opinion of the public and others, that value and significance is brought to the forth, right? I was reading a book that we should, I think all of us should read, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness, it's called, by Tim Keller. He would say this, that Tim Keller would say that our ego is empty, right? Our human ego is empty in and of ourselves. And whether our ego is empty because we have too low a view of ourselves or too high, right? We're trying to fill it up with things that will never truly fill our ego. That we are all in this pursuit. It's human nature, pursue this significance and this feeling that maybe I have something to give, and yet even trying to fill up on our own and creating that is going to leave us empty, right? And what's interesting is inside of this scene, right, Aladdin is trying to figure out, how do I get to a point of significance or being significant so I can grab the attention of the princess? And then he runs into this guy named the genie, right? Pops out of the lamp, pops out of the bottle, right? And he can offer Aladdin 3 wishes, right? Can offer Aladdin 3 wishes. And I think oftentimes that's exactly how we treat life. We treat life kind of like the genie in the bottle. Maybe we treat God that way, where we're like, hey, if you could give me this or you could give me that, then I will experience significance in this life. I'll experience significance. And so we rub the lamp and we wish for this, we wish for that, to try to get to a place where maybe I can finally be free to enjoy this significance, right? If I get the right job, then I'll have it. If If I have enough money, then I'll have it. If I have the right family, I'll have it. If I have the right clothes, the right grades, the right car, then I will have it. And the genie, what the genie offers, we see in the song in particular, Friend Like Me, so he offers all these things. I can give you all these things. Do you know of anybody else like me, right? That's how we often are told to interact with life. It's just to see it like the genie in the bottle. If I had this, or if I had that, or if I could make this happen, then my life will be fulfilled. Then my life will be happening. And here's the thing about chasing or creating significance. It will change you. Chasing significance, it does change you. Chasing significance, I think, changes you in two ways. It changes you because you compromise your character. Chasing significance will compromise your character because here's the reality. I have to do whatever it takes to become significant, to become famous, to become wealthy, to become secure in who I am, to become a better family. And so that the significance, whatever I define that value, meaning behind, right, then I will do whatever it takes. And so if that means, taking out of this where I shouldn't, if that means burning this bridge, if that means that I need to kind of cut this or cut corners here, right, it will compromise your character. And chasing significance, it will create a shallow spirituality, right? It'll create something where all of a sudden God becomes my genie. As long as I, in whatever my definition of significance is, becomes fulfilled, then I'm okay, right? We see that in Aladdin's life. He starts to cut corners, right? If I could just become this, if I could just become that. And what's interesting is this. There's an interesting line where Genie and Aladdin are talking, and Aladdin's trying to figure out what to use his 3 wishes on. And he tells the genie, he's like, I got 3 wishes, right? And I'm going to use 2 on me and 1 on you, right? I promise that will happen. And the genie says a fascinating line. He says this, the thing about wishes is this, the more you have, the more you want. The more you have, the more you want. And I think the thing about significance is this, the more you chase, the more you change. Because the more that's there and the more wishes that I have for my life to be a certain way, then I'm going to change to try to fit that in. And what we're going to see is this, is that chasing or creating significance in our life and trying to do that in and of ourselves is a rat race that is never going to actually fulfill, and it's never actually going to satisfy. And we see that in Scripture. There's actually a book that talks about life being very, very, very short and life being very, very meaningless, is what the author says. So this is where we're going to start, Ecclesiastes, okay? Ecclesiastes 1, verses 1 and 2. Now, I love this book because it's a wisdom book, right? Comes between Proverbs, comes after Job, and you see some really deep wisdom there, right? But what's interesting about this book of wisdom is that it takes kind of a cynical side of wisdom, right? It talks about wisdom in really healthy ways, to follow what the proverb says, to live in the right way. But what the writer of Ecclesiastes, and ultimately what the teacher who he's writing these words from, is saying is that life does not always go as we think it should go. Right? Life isn't always fair, basically, is what he's saying. And we're going to see that. This is what is written in the first chapter, first verse. The words of the teacher, which the writing is from the author of Ecclesiastes, writing about the words of the teacher. Son of David, king in Jerusalem. Some believe it's Solomon. Others believe it's further generations of David's ancestry. But whatever it may be, right? We see there's a connection to the kingship of David. Meaningless, he says, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. Okay, well, there you go, right? That's just about as simple as it gets. Everything is meaningless, which there might be some days you wake up and you're like, that's just how I feel, right? I gotta go get my Starbucks or my Dunkin' because everything is meaningless, right? And the teacher in Ecclesiastes, he's telling us this. And he's telling us it is meaningless, right? Life is just meaningless. Everything is meaningless. But what does he mean by that? Because I don't think he means that there's no meaning to life. But I think that what he means is there needs to be a right perspective of life. This word meaningless in Hebrew, it's translated to hevel. And hefel means a vapor or a smoke. So just think about being around a campfire and smoke is billowing up, right? And trying to grab that, right? You can see it, but it's hard to grab. You cannot grab it in a solid form. And what the author of Ecclesiastes and the teacher is saying, he's saying this, life is like smoke. It's hard to grab onto and understand sometimes. It's hard to grab onto and understand. It's hard to understand how everything can go so right in this moment and then tragedy strikes over here. It's hard to understand how I can be living life how I think is right and good, and yet this happens. It can be hard to understand how someone who cut corners makes it and gets, the gold in the end, right? It can be hard to understand those things. And he says this, and then he kind of brings it down to life, and he says, everything is temporary or fleeting. Everything can be going well one day, but tragedy strikes the next. And we see that this plays out in the multiple of the passages here. He continues in verse 3. What do people gain from all their labors, at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place that the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Okay, so here's the reality. As encouraging as this is, right, you might be wondering, why are we going here? Because the writer of Ecclesiastes, what he is doing is this. He's telling us a few things. He's telling us primarily two things in this passage. One is this: time goes on. He says, generations come, generations go. Things happen. Nothing's new under the sun. Time has existed, and people are going to continue to move on, and you're not going to remember former generations. That literally we're a blip on the map of the entire universe. That as you live through this life, right, there will be a point where people don't remember your name. Right? I don't remember anybody in my family like past maybe a couple generations. Right? I don't know who I was connected to. I'm not sure who influenced my family, right? And he's saying time goes on. And so whatever you think your significance is, right? Careful what you build that into, because time goes on and you will be not remembered. Your generation is going to move on. It's just like the blowing of the winds. But he also says this, that everyone will die. Everyone will die. He says, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're good or evil, whether you were successful or not successful, it don't matter. Everybody's going to die. He says everybody returns to where they came from, right? The dust of the ground. If we're trying to create significance in our life, what I think he's saying is it will disappear at some point. If we're trying to create the significance for our own life, it'll disappear. People will forget us. People will move on. Things will take place. And I think it comes to this point that I cannot create true significance. I can't. Because the thing that I lean on will be old someday and will be forgotten. My life, if I create on just my life alone and my name, someday I'll be in the grounds. And generations will continue to develop, right? Doesn't mean I can't leave an impact. Just what is my significance based on? Because true significance, it must go deeper than my performance and public opinion. It has to go deeper than how I just feel in a day. And what do I lean into for true significance? Where should my life be for true significance? When we look at Aladdin and Jasmine's story, right? They're trying to figure out significance. And Aladdin's like, well, if I just had a performance unlike any other, if I just looked like a prince, act like a prince, did like a prince, right? Then I would have everything going on. If the public opinion about me changed, I'm not a street rat, I'm a prince, then I will have significance, right? And the queen's like, if I was just able to be free and just be able to do what I want and be independent, then I could have significance, right? If I could just do my thing and just show people who I actually am. And what's interesting is neither of those things actually totally fulfill, because they wanted vice versa each other's lives. But what's interesting is in trying to attain each other's lives, they weren't actually fully attaining significance, because it goes deeper than that. The genie, he looked at Aladdin at one point. He said, Aladdin, I can change all the external things going on, but I can't change who you are. It has to go deeper. And I think the writer of Ecclesiastes, he tells us true significance is found deeper than just the visible external things of life. It has to. It's not like those things are bad, but you need to be present to the everyday, the day in and day out, because those things are fleeting. Those things will disappear. And this is where he goes in chapter 12, verse 13, 14. This is the writer talking, not the teacher anymore, the author of the book. He says, now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. Here's the reality. What the author is not saying is fear God, like be scared of him, but fear God in a reverence, a holiness, and a love. The fear of God is this loving, beautiful, all in wonder of who he is and all that he's done. It is living, recognizing who he is and recognizing who I am in light of who he is, and living that out of love because of who he is. When I recognize that, I start to understand that I was actually created with significance. When I understand the fear of God and I have a reverence for who he is, and I start to look at the story of God and what he's done for me, I start to understand that I actually was created with a significance, and it changes everything. This is what we see, Genesis 1. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Right? And then Psalm 8 continues. You have made them a little lower than the angels, talking about humans, and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet. All flocks and herds and animals of the wild, the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea, all that swim the paths of the sea, that is who you have put under humans. God created us with significance. There's inherent value and worth tied to us all. We are significant not because we've created our own significance, but we were created with significance by the one who is significant. And here's how we can see that. First is this, we're creating God's image. The one who is creator, sustainer of life, who is the one who defines significance, created us in his image. How much more significant can we get? We are the most beloved created beings. He wanted to infuse us with his image, his character, his personality, right? I'm not sure that God looks like us in human form. I'm not sure, right? But I know this, that internally he created us to function in relationship and community, to function with values and with different things that ultimately are his. Talk about having significance. That's significant. We're not just like an animal. We're not just like a plant or a tree or whatever. We are created different and beyond that. But secondly, we are created to be in relationship with God. We've been created with significance in his image, but also to have a relationship with him. How much more significant can my life be? He wants a relationship with me. The God of the universe does, right? But lastly is this. We are created to partner with God. That's significant. Talk about having value and worth and respect and honor for our lives. He invited us to partner with him, made in his image, included in a relationship with him, to ultimately partner with him on this earth. He says he's given us, right, this area to subdue, to rule over the works of his hands. He put everything under their feet, right? He called us to rule over the fish and the sea and to ultimately be the one that's leading in that way. What happened is this, that sin distorted our idea of significance. It just did. What I think is interesting is Satan, he worked his way into the garden and he distorted significance from the very beginning. And he distorted it by asking a very deceiving question. And the question was, did God really say that? And then he said a statement that just distorted this whole idea. You can become like God by taking of the fruit. That by taking the fruit, you will have a wisdom like God. And wisdom, right? Wisdom is in the fear of God. Wisdom is understanding that God created us in his image already. That's where significance is found. And I think the distorting, deceiving is that we have to somehow create significance so that I can become a God in a sense, so I can become the full fulfillment of myself in a sense. And our world believes that. And so we're all trying to find our own path in social media and all these different things to make sure that I'm a step ahead of everybody else so that I don't lose the battle of significance and success in life. And here's the lie, is that I need to perform or believe public opinion to have significance. What are the main avenues for people to be found? Right? Public opinion, social media, and performance, sports, theater, whatever it may be, right? That's where my significance. And if those things fail me, then I must not be as significant as I think. The reality is this, we are created with it, but sin distorted it. Yet the cross redeemed it. Redeemed it in such a beautiful way. Because Jesus came to redeem us into this significance. Because here's the reality. Sin distorted it, and so we've been chasing this significance battle, this significance chase throughout life. And Jesus came, the one who created significance, is the one with significance, defined significance, right, and value and all of those things, and decided to humble himself, embrace humanity. We're going to read a passage here that talks about that. Give up of his significance to ultimately give us and redeem us back into what significance means. It's the letting go of my significance so that you can have it. It is giving you my significance so that you are powered underneath of it. That's what he did for us. Philippians 2. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, right? Continues in verse 8. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. The gospel tells me this, the one who holds significance gave that up to embrace humanity. And in embracing humanity, he did not grasp for his divinity to save himself. He never used it once for himself. He laid down his life, and he allowed the power of his significance to raise us up and give us life. He laid down his significance so that he could give us life, right? There's power there. What I need to understand is true significance is found standing at the foot of the cross. True significance is not found in my performance, but in his. That when I stand at the foot of the cross, I recognize two things. That my significance could never be found in and of myself because I am sinful. My sin distorts significance. It becomes all about me. It becomes about me and my pride and my arrogance and me trying to grab the ladder of performance. And I could never perform my way into a relationship with God and into the significance that God is talking about because there is sin in the way. The reality is this, at the same time at the cross, Jesus lavishes his significance onto us by taking our sin onto himself. It's the whole 2 Corinthians 5. He became sin who knew no sin so we could become the righteousness of God. that he redeems us into significance, helps us understand what our made in his image conversation is, understand that we are loved by him and that we are here to partner with him. It helps me understand what significance is all about. But also looking at the cross, it tells me about the grace of God, which is the most significant thing that I could ever attach my life to. Talk about significance. The God of the world would send his one and only Son to take my place. And he is saying something about our significance to him, that he does love us. Come on, you got to think about it, right? My significance has to go past my performance. And when I see it go past my performance and how I doll myself up or whatever, right? All of a sudden I'm attaching to the God of the universe this fear of God, this reverence that, oh my gosh, he would love me so much that he would die, send his Son to die for me. That's how significant I am to him. I was an enemy. I was far off, and yet he decided to give life to me. Now, have you said yes to Jesus is the question. Have you said yes to Jesus and then what it means to find significance at the cross, right? Through the gospel. The gospel tells me I don't have to perform anymore because Jesus came into the courtroom, paid for my penalty, walked me out. I am not on trial anymore. My sin is covered. That God sees me as he sees Jesus if I have said yes to him. And I can be forgiven and I can turn from and start living for Jesus. And if you've never said yes to Jesus, we'd love to have that conversation. We'd love to have the conversation with you and wrestle with that and what it looks like in your life. Because here's the reality. When I connect my life to Jesus, it's not just a one-time moment that, okay, everything's settled and great, I got it figured out, I can go live life. But actually, when I connect my life to Jesus, I start to see Jesus as the example for my life. And I start to follow him differently. And this is what it means. That true significance is all about self-forgetfulness. That I begin to understand that significance, it really is not about myself. It's about thinking about others. It is significance, and understanding significance really starts to take form when it doesn't become about myself, right? Because that's what Jesus did for us. That Jesus not only redeems us into significance, but he defines significance. Philippians 2 tells us that he embraced humanity. He got outside of himself. He was humbled all the way to the cross, that he loved us so much, he died for us, and that our lives need to take shape in that. That if you and I are to embrace being significant in this life, it means to be self-forgetful, to be selfless, to love like Jesus loved, because that is the way of Jesus. Tim Keller would call this gospel humility. It's not thinking more of or less of myself, it's thinking of myself less. Significance in the gospel becomes tied to worshiping God, having a reverence and a fear for him, and loving others. True gospel humility means an ego that is not puffed up but filled up. True gospel humility looks at what Jesus did for me and understands that he is the one that fills up my ego, my significance. I don't have to try to fight for it. I don't have to try to compete for it. I don't have to try to perform for it. I don't have to be the one ahead of everybody else. I can actually be filled up by the gospel because he has defined it all. He has saved me from it all. He has filled me up. He's given me a new identity, a new community, a new mission. He's given me life. And so I can lead out of that, right? Tim Keller would use it this way. He would say a self-forgetful person's ego works like their toes, right? It works like their toes. Toes, you don't even think about them working. They just go, right? A self-forgetful person's ego, it doesn't, you don't have to think about it. It just happens and it goes. And what it does is it thinks about others just very naturally. You're no longer competing, you're collaborating and celebrating others. You're no longer kind of, woe is me when I take criticism, but you have an identity based in Jesus already, so you can take that criticism and find ways to be encouraged by it. You don't have to look at others and say, how do I get ahead of them, right? But how can I meet their needs? That I think significance in our world has been flipped upside down. We're all trying to create, we're all trying every day to think about how do I get ahead? How do I get ahead? How do I plan my life so that I lead a life of significance? And what Jesus says is this, that I am the one that gives you significance and shows you how to live a life of significance. Significance is not found in how much success you have in life. It's found out how self-forgetful you can be in life. Because I define significance, which was taking your sin and giving you my righteousness. Taking your sin and giving you my significance. So when God looks at me, he sees Jesus. That's my challenge to you today, is that instead of looking for the genie lamp of life, that you would look at the cross and allow yourself to be so captured by the beauty of the gospel that it changes you at the core. And so, Father, we thank you for who you are and all that you do. We thank you for loving us, for leading us, for guiding us. We ask that you would move in such a way here in this gospel understanding of significance. You would challenge our hearts, challenge our minds to embrace that. And Father, I pray that you would do what only you can do. We praise you and we love you. Pray this in your name. Amen. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week for another At the Movies.